There are books that shape history. There are books that inspire nations. And then there are books that vanish. Not because they were lost, but because someone decided they should not survive. Tonight, we are stepping into one of the most controversial texts in religious history, a book quoted in the New Testament, a book preserved in ancient Ethiopia, a book discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, a book once read by early Christians. And yet, a book removed from the Bible. This is the story of the Book of Enoch, and the question that refuses to go away. Why was it banned? To understand the controversy, we must first understand the man behind the mystery. Enoch. He appears briefly in the Bible, almost like a whisper. In Genesis chapter 5, we are told something unusual. While every other patriarch is described with the same final phrase, "and he died," Enoch's story ends differently. Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more, because God took him. No explanation, no death record, no burial site. Just disappearance. This single line ignited centuries of speculation. Who was this man who did not taste death? Was he taken to heaven? Did he receive divine revelation? Did he see things no human was meant to see? The Book of Enoch claims to answer those questions, and what it reveals is staggering. The book expands. Genesis chapter 6, the strange passage about the sons of God and the daughters of men. It tells of heavenly beings called Watchers who descended to earth. They taught humanity forbidden knowledge, astrology, weapon making, sorcery, cosmetics, enchantments. And then came the giants. Violent beings who corrupted the earth. According to Enoch, the flood of Noah was not just judgment for human sin. It was a cosmic cleansing, a war between heaven and rebellion. Now pause for a moment. If this book was so explosive, why do most Christians today barely know it exists? The Book of Enoch was never entirely lost. It survived in full within the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. In fact, the Ethiopian Bible still includes it today. For centuries, Western Christianity dismissed it as apocryphal, useful perhaps, but not divinely inspired. Yet here is where things become uncomfortable. The New Testament book of Jude directly quotes Enoch. Not alludes, not references. Quotes. Jude 1:14 says, Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them, and then it delivers a prophecy almost word for word from 1 Enoch. Which raises a dangerous question. If Jude quoted it as prophecy, why was it later removed from Scripture? Was it theological politics? Was it fear of its supernatural themes? Was it discomfort with its angelology? Or was it simply never meant to be canonical? To answer that, we must step into the world of early Christianity. In the first few centuries after Christ, there was no single bound Bible. Communities used different collections of writings. Some texts were universally accepted, others were debated. The Book of Enoch was widely read among early Jewish groups. Fragments of it were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, meaning the Essenes treasured it. Church fathers like Tertullian defended it, but over time, something shifted. As Christianity expanded into the Greco-Roman world, theological emphasis began to change. The Church increasingly emphasized orthodoxy, structure, and doctrinal clarity. Books that stirred speculation or encouraged fringe cosmology became uncomfortable. And Enoch does exactly that. It opens doors into a layered universe of angels, cosmic hierarchies, heavenly journeys, apocalyptic timelines, and divine secrets. It presents a worldview that feels more mystical than institutional. And institutions often grow cautious around mystery. But here's the tension removing. A book does not erase its influence. The imagery of fallen angels, the language of final judgment, the idea of binding rebellious spirits, the title Son of Man in apocalyptic context, all of these themes appear in the New Testament. Many scholars argue that Enoch shaped Second Temple Jewish thought, the very intellectual world into which Jesus was born, which makes the silence around it even more intriguing. Was it removed because it was false, or because it was too influential in ways that later theology struggled to contain. And here's another layer. The Book of Enoch is not one single text. What we call 1 Enoch is actually a compilation of multiple writings composed between 300 BCE and 100 BCE. That means it was written long after the historical Enoch. So then the next question emerges. Was it pseudepigrapha, a text written in the name of an ancient figure for authority? If so, does that automatically disqualify it? Ancient Jewish tradition did not view authorship the way we do today. Many writings were attributed symbolically, but by the 4th century, as church councils began formalizing the canon, criteria became stricter: apostolic origin, widespread use, doctrinal consistency. Enoch began to fall short under those standards, especially since it was not universally used across all Christian communities, and yet the Ethiopian Church never removed it, which forces us to ask, did the Western Church narrow the canon, or did Ethiopia preserve something others discarded? These are not simple questions. They are layered with history, power, theology, and human decision-making. But here is what makes this discussion powerful. The Book of Enoch refuses to die. Every generation rediscovers it. Every generation asks the same thing. Why does this book feel hidden? In the 1940s, when fragments of Enoch were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars were stunned. It proved that Enoch was not a medieval fabrication. It was ancient. Very ancient. Older than Christianity itself. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't a fringe fantasy text. It was part of the religious atmosphere of Jesus' time, which means ignoring it doesn't erase its relevance. So tonight, we begin a journey, not to sensationalize, not to mystify, but to understand, because sometimes what is labeled forbidden knowledge is simply knowledge that complicates simple answers. And the Book of Enoch complicates everything. In the next section, we will dive deeper into what Enoch actually says, not the rumors, not the internet myths, but the text itself. What exactly did the Watchers teach? Who were the Nephilim? And why did early readers consider this story so important? To understand why it was banned, we must first confront what it contains. And that is where the real story begins. In the last section, we uncovered the mystery surrounding the Book of Enoch, a text quoted in the New Testament, preserved in Ethiopia, and rediscovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls. But now we move from history into the story itself, because the controversy surrounding Enoch is not just about canonization. It's about content. And what it claims happened before the flood. The Book of Enoch opens with a dramatic declaration of judgment. It describes a coming day when God will judge the wicked and vindicate the righteous. But quickly, the narrative shifts backward to a cosmic rebellion that predates Noah. The focus turns to a group of angels called the Watchers. The term comes from the Aramaic word meaning those who are awake, heavenly beings, assigned to observe humanity. But according to Enoch, observation became temptation. In chapters 6 through 16, we are told that 200 Watchers descended to Mount Hermon. Their leader was named Semyaza. Among them was Azazel, a name that later becomes associated with demonic corruption. They made a pact. A covenant, not with God, but with each other. They swore to take human women as wives. This is Enoch's interpretation of the mysterious Genesis 6 passage. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. Enoch removes ambiguity. He says these sons of God were angels. And what happened next was catastrophic. The unions produced offspring known as the Nephilim. Giants. Violent beings of immense strength. But here's where Enoch adds something even more provocative. The Watchers didn't just mate with humanity. They taught them. Azazel taught the making of swords and shields, the art of warfare. Others taught astrology, how to read the stars. Some taught enchantments and sorcery. Others revealed the secrets of cosmetics and adornment. Metallurgy. Herbal knowledge, celestial signs. According to Enoch, This was forbidden knowledge, heavenly mysteries given to humanity before its time. And this knowledge corrupted the earth. Violence increased, bloodshed spread. The giants consumed everything in sight. And when resources ran out, they devoured humanity. It is apocalyptic imagery, but it's not random. Enoch is reframing the flood narrative. Instead of viewing the flood as punishment for generic sin, Enoch presents it as divine intervention in a supernatural rebellion. Humanity was not just morally flawed. It was spiritually contaminated. The earth was not merely sinful. It was invaded. And this idea changes everything, because if the flood was a cosmic reset, a cleansing of hybrid corruption, then history becomes a battleground between heaven and rebellion. Now consider why this might have made later religious authorities uncomfortable. This narrative shifts blame. Instead of humanity being solely responsible for its fall, Enoch introduces angelic culpability. Corruption didn't begin entirely from below. It came from above. That theological nuance is explosive. Enoch describes how the cries of humanity rose to heaven. The archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, appealed to God for intervention. And judgment came. Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel and cast him into darkness. Gabriel was sent to destroy the giants by turning them against one another. Michael was instructed to bind Semyaza and the other watchers beneath the earth until the final judgment. Notice something. This language mirrors New Testament themes. Into Peter and Jude, we read about angels who sinned and were cast into chains of darkness. That imagery doesn't come from Genesis. It comes from Enoch. Which suggests early Christians were familiar with this framework. Now pause here. If Enoch influenced early Christian thought about fallen angels and final judgment, then excluding it from the canon becomes even more intriguing, because it wasn't irrelevant. It was foundational in some ways, yet its detailed cosmology may have raised concerns. Enoch expands heaven into layers. It describes heavenly journeys where Enoch is taken through cosmic realms. He sees storehouses of wind, chambers of stars, prisons of angels. It reads almost like an ancient apocalypse, which, in literary terms, it is, but as Christianity matured and confronted Gnosticism, a movement obsessed with secret knowledge and hidden cosmology, leaders became cautious. Texts that emphasized mystical revelation to being misunderstood, and Enoch is saturated with revelation. But there's another layer. Enoch does not present the watchers sympathetically. They are not misunderstood beings. They are rebels. Their knowledge is not neutral. It is destructive. This challenges a modern narrative that knowledge is always good. Enoch suggests timing matters, authority matters, boundaries matter. And knowledge outside divine order leads to chaos. That theme echoes through scripture. Think about Eden. The tree of knowledge. Forbidden fruit. Timing. Rebellion. Enoch amplifies that pattern onto a cosmic scale. But here's where things become even more unsettling. After the giants are destroyed in the flood, Enoch says their spirits remain disembodied, wandering, oppressive. These, he claims, become what we call evil spirits. This is one of the earliest Jewish explanations for demons. And again, that theology doesn't come directly from Genesis. It comes from Enoch, which means when Jesus casts out demons in the Gospels, the audience may have understood those spirits within an Enochic framework. Now imagine you are a 4th century bishop trying to standardize doctrine across a rapidly expanding empire. Would you include a text that describes angels mating with humans, explains demons as hybrid spirits, details secret celestial mechanics, expands cosmic geography beyond simple narrative here? Would you prioritize texts with clearer apostolic authorship and consistent theological emphasis? This is not conspiracy, it's canon formation under pressure. But here's the key. Removal from canon does not equal falsehood. It often reflects discernment criteria. And discernment is shaped by historical context. Enoch may not have met the final standard of universal apostolic authority, but it undeniably shaped the imagination of Second Temple Judaism, which means understanding it helps us understand the world Jesus entered. And perhaps that is why modern audiences feel drawn to it again, because it opens a window into an ancient worldview that feels larger, stranger, and more supernatural than the simplified faith many inherited. But we are just beginning. In the next section, we will explore Enoch's heavenly journeys, the visions of the Son of Man, the apocalyptic timelines, and the passages that eerily resemble the Book of Revelation, because the Watchers were only the beginning. The deeper we go, the clearer the stakes become, and the real question starts to sharpen. Was the Book of Enoch banned because it was dangerous, or because it was powerful? In the last section, we explored the rebellion of the Watchers, the descent from heaven, the corruption of humanity, and the cosmic judgment that followed. But now the Book of Enoch shifts again, from rebellion to revelation, from angels to a figure so mysterious that his presence alone may explain why this book became controversial. Because hidden inside Enoch's visions is a title that would later define Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, long before the Gospels were written, long before Bethlehem, long before the cross. Enoch describes a pre-existent heavenly figure called the Son of Man, and what he says is staggering. In what scholars call the parables of Enoch, chapters 37 through 71, Enoch records a series of apocalyptic visions. He sees thrones set in heaven. He sees the Ancient of Days seated in glory. He sees angels standing in awe. And then he sees him, a chosen one, a righteous one, a figure whose name was known before the sun and stars were created. Enoch writes that this Son of Man was hidden in the presence of God before creation. Hidden, reserved, prepared. He is described as the one who will judge kings and mighty rulers, the one who will sit on a throne of glory, the one before whom the wicked will tremble. Now pause. Those descriptions sound familiar. Because in the New Testament, Jesus repeatedly refers to himself as the Son of Man, not Messiah most often, not Son of God primarily. But Son of Man. That title traces back to Daniel chapter 7, where one like a Son of Man comes with the clouds of heaven and is given dominion and glory. But Enoch expands Daniel's vision. In Enoch, the Son of Man is not merely symbolic. He is personal. Pre-existent. Judicial. Cosmic. He judges the Watchers. He judges kings. He brings vindication to the righteous. And his authority comes directly from the Ancient of Days. This is not a minor detail, because it suggests that Jewish audiences before Christ already had a developed expectation of a heavenly Redeemer figure. Which means, when Jesus used that title, he was stepping into a theological framework that Enoch helped shape. But here is where it becomes even more controversial. Enoch does something unexpected near the end of the parables. In chapter 71, the Son of Man is revealed to be Enoch himself, or at least, Enoch is identified with that heavenly figure. This passage has puzzled scholars for centuries. Is it symbolic? Is it visionary union? Is it an editorial addition? Or is it an example of apocalyptic literature, blending identities for theological effect? Whatever the case, it complicates interpretation, and complication makes institutions cautious. If Enoch presents a Son of Man theology that overlaps with Christology, but also blurs identity in places, early church leaders would have had to wrestle with that tension. Did Enoch prophetically anticipate Christ? Or does it present an alternative messianic framework? That question alone may have made canonization difficult, but let's go deeper. Enoch describes the Son of Man as a light to the nations. As a staff for the righteous. As hope for the oppressed. As a judge who exposes hidden things. He speaks of books being opened in heaven, of deeds recorded. Of a final reckoning. Again, this mirrors Revelation. It mirrors Matthew 5. It mirrors the gospel narrative of final judgment, which means Enoch was not a fringe imagination. It was part of the theological atmosphere of Second Temple Judaism. The early church inherited that atmosphere, but as Christianity expanded into Gentile territory, leaders sought to clarify doctrine around Christ's unique identity. Any text that risked confusion about pre-existence, messianic titles, or prophetic symbolism would undergo intense scrutiny. And Enoch's Son of Man passages are dense. They are poetic, symbolic, layered, beautiful, but not simple, and simplicity often wins in canon formation. There's another dimension. Enoch emphasizes judgment on earthly rulers. It repeatedly warns kings, governors, and the powerful that they will answer to the Son of Man. In a persecuted minority movement, that message is empowering. But once Christianity gained imperial favor under Constantine, texts that strongly condemn earthly rulers could feel politically sensitive. We cannot say with certainty that politics removed Enoch, but we cannot ignore that canon formation happened in real historical environments, shaped by power structures. Now let's consider something else. Unlike the Gospels, which root Christ in historical narrative, birth, ministry, crucifixion, resurrection, Enoch's Son of Man exists almost entirely in heavenly vision. There is no incarnation. No cross. No empty tomb. Just cosmic enthronement. For Christian theology, the incarnation is central. Any text emphasizing pre-existent glory without incarnation might feel incomplete. Or even distracting. And yet, the fact remains. The title Jesus used most often for himself appears vividly in Enoch before the Gospels were written, which raises a question modern readers wrestle with. Did Jesus draw from Enochic expectation? Or was Enoch anticipating something greater than itself? Scholars debate, theologians argue, but the overlap is undeniable, and perhaps that overlap made church leaders cautious, because including Enoch could blur the boundary between prophetic anticipation and canonical revelation. But here is what makes this powerful for your audience. The Book of Enoch shows us that Jewish thought before Christ was far more supernatural and apocalyptic than many realized. It was charged with expectation, charged with cosmic tension, charged with anticipation of a heavenly deliverer, which makes the arrival of Jesus even more dramatic. He didn't emerge in a vacuum. He stepped into a world already longing for the Son of Man. And yet, despite its influence, Enoch was gradually excluded from most biblical canons, not violently, not dramatically, but quietly. By the 4th century, major councils did not include it in the list of authoritative scripture, except in Ethiopia. Where it remains sacred. Why Ethiopia? How did this ancient African church preserve what the West set aside? That is where our journey moves next, because the survival of Enoch in Ethiopia is not accidental. It tells a story of geography, isolation, and theological independence. And in the next section, we will uncover how one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world kept the Book of Enoch alive, while the rest of Christianity let it fade. And that survival may be one of the most fascinating parts of this entire mystery. In the last section, we explored the mysterious Son of Man in Enoch, a pre-existent heavenly figure whose description sounds strikingly similar to the Christ of the New Testament. But while Western Christianity slowly distanced itself from the Book of Enoch, one ancient church refused to let it disappear. To understand why Enoch survived at all, we must travel, not to Rome. Not to Constantinople, not to Jerusalem, but to Africa. To the ancient kingdom of Aksum. To what we now call Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, and one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. According to tradition, Christianity reached Ethiopia in the 4th century through Frumentius, later known as Abba Salamah. But Ethiopia's spiritual story begins even earlier. In the Book of Acts, we read of an Ethiopian eunuch baptized by Philip the Evangelist. That encounter symbolizes something profound. Christianity was never exclusively European. From the beginning, it was global. And in Ethiopia, Christianity took root in a way that preserved ancient Jewish Christian traditions long after they faded elsewhere. The Ethiopian biblical canon is larger than the Western canon. It includes books like Jubeiles.1 Enoch. And other texts considered apocryphal by most Protestant traditions. But here's the key difference. While Western Christianity underwent intense theological debates shaped by Greco-Roman philosophy, Ethiopia developed with relative isolation. It was geographically distant from the councils of Rome and Constantinople, which means canon formation there followed a slightly different trajectory. The Book of Enoch was never removed because it was never seen as problematic. It was simply part of Scripture, preserved in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia. For centuries, Western scholars didn't even have access to a complete copy of Enoch. It was considered lost. Until the 18th century. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce travelled to Ethiopia and returned with 3 manuscripts of Enoch. Europe was stunned. Because for generations, people assumed the book had vanished. Instead, it had been quietly safeguarded, not hidden in secrecy, but read, copied, and revered in Ethiopian churches. Now ask yourself something. If Enoch was truly dangerous or heretical, would one of the oldest continuous Christian traditions have preserved it for over 1,500 years? Or does its preservation suggest a difference in theological emphasis? The Ethiopian Church maintained strong continuity with Jewish traditions, dietary practices, Old Testament reverence, liturgical symbolism. In that context, Enoch's apocalyptic and angelic worldview fit naturally. It wasn't strange. It was familiar. But in Western Christianity, especially after the Protestant Reformation, there was increasing emphasis on sola scriptura, Scripture alone, and that Scripture had already been narrowed centuries earlier. The Reformers did not revisit Enoch's status. They inherited a canon, which means the exclusion of Enoch became normalized. Most believers never questioned it, because they never encountered it. Now here's something even more fascinating. Fragments of Enoch were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the mid-20th century. These scrolls, found near Qumran between 1947 and 1956, confirmed something critical. Enoch was widely read among Jewish sects before Christ. It wasn't a medieval invention. It wasn't an Ethiopian fabrication. It was ancient. The Qumran community copied it repeatedly. That means it carried authority in some Jewish circles during the Second Temple period. And yet, Rabbinic Judaism eventually excluded it as well. After the destruction of the Temple in 70 AD, Jewish leaders consolidated their canon around texts written in Hebrew and associated with recognized prophetic tradition. Enoch, largely preserved in Aramaic and later Ge'ez, fell outside that consolidation. So here we see something important. The exclusion of Enoch was not a single dramatic ban. It was a gradual marginalization. As religious communities formalized identity, they streamlined Scripture, and streamlined texts are easier to standardize across expanding empires. But Ethiopia, insulated from those imperial pressures, continued its tradition uninterrupted. Which brings us to a powerful realization. The Bible you hold today is not merely a collection of inspired writings. It is also the result of historical discernment. Communities decided, councils debated, criteria were applied, and those criteria varied across regions. This does not automatically invalidate the Western canon, nor does it automatically elevate Enoch to canonical status, but it reminds us that canon formation was complex, human. Contextual. Now imagine an Ethiopian Christian in the 10th century. You grow up hearing readings from Enoch alongside Genesis and Isaiah. You hear about the Watchers. You hear about the Son of Man. You hear about cosmic judgment. For you, this is normal. Now imagine a European Christian in the same century. You have never heard of Enoch beyond a brief mention in Genesis. To worlds, to canons. One faith. That reality alone challenges simplistic narratives. Was Enoch banned, or was it simply not universally received? And does regional variation imply corruption or diversity within early Christianity? The Ethiopian preservation of Enoch forces modern readers to confront assumptions, because it proves that Christianity was never monolithic. It had branches, streams, traditions, and some streams preserved texts, others released. But here's the question that sharpens as we move forward. If Enoch survived in Ethiopia and influenced early Jewish thought, why did it ultimately lose authority in the dominant branches of Christianity? Was it theological discomfort, concerns about authorship, fear of apocalyptic excess, or a desire to distance Christian doctrine from speculative cosmology? In the next section, we will examine the process of canon formation more closely. How were books evaluated? Who decided? What criteria mattered? And did Enoch fail those criteria? Or was it edged out by history? Because understanding how the canon was formed may bring us closer to answering the central question of this entire investigation. Was the Book of Enoch banned, or simply left behind? In the last section, we saw how the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church will reserve the Book of Enoch, while much of the Western Church allowed it to fade from common use. Now we arrive at the question that sits at the heart of this entire debate. Who decided which books belong in the Bible, and by what authority? Contrary to popular conspiracy theories, the canon of Scripture was not created overnight in a secret meeting where powerful men voted books in or out. The process was gradual, organic, and, at times, messy. In the early centuries of Christianity, believers relied heavily on the Hebrew Scriptures, what we now call the Old Testament, alongside the teachings of the apostles. Letters circulated, gospels were copied, communities shared writings that strengthened faith and clarified doctrine. But there was no single, bound Bible as we know it today. Different churches used slightly different collections of texts. Over time, patterns emerged. Certain writings were read everywhere. The four Gospels, Paul's letters. Acts. Others were debated. Hebrews, Revelation, James, and some were respected, but not universally accepted. The Book of Enoch fell into that last category. It was known, it was quoted. It was valued in some circles, but it never achieved universal recognition across the growing Christian world. By the 4th century, as Christianity gained legal status under Constantine, the need for doctrinal unity intensified. Councils and synods began clarifying which books were authoritative for teaching and worship. One significant voice in this period was Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria. In his Easter letter of 367 AD, he listed the 27 books of the New Testament that most Christians recognize today. Enoch was not included. But here's something important. There was no dramatic declaration saying, "We ban the Book of Enoch." Instead, canon formation operated more like a process of recognition than rejection. Church leaders asked, was this text written by an apostle or a close associate of one? Was it widely used in churches across different regions? Was its theology consistent with what had already been received on authorship? Enoch faced a challenge. The historical Enoch lived before the flood, long before writing systems developed in the ancient Near East. Scholars agree that 1 Enoch was composed between 300 BCE and 100 BCE. That means it was pseudepigraphal, written under the name of an ancient figure. Now, pseudepigraphy was not automatically disqualifying in Jewish literature, but as Christianity matured, apostolic connection became central. Texts directly tied to eyewitnesses of Christ carried unique authority. Enoch, though ancient, had no apostolic link. On widespread usage, Enoch was strong in certain Jewish sects and in Ethiopia, but it lacked consistent use across Rome, Asia Minor, North Africa, and other Christian centers. And consistency mattered. The early church was fighting heresies, Gnosticism, Arianism, and others. Texts that were universally affirmed helped unify doctrine. Finally, theology. This is where Enoch becomes complex. Its elaborate angelology and cosmology were not inherently heretical, but they were expansive, speculative, and capable of fueling fringe interpretations. In a period when church leaders were already battling groups obsessed with secret knowledge, mystical hierarchies, and hidden revelations, Caution made sense. The priority was clarity. Simplicity. Focus on Christ's life, death, and resurrection, not layered celestial mechanics. But let's pause here. Does exclusion from canon mean a text is false? Not necessarily. The early church recognized different categories of literature. Some writings were inspired and authoritative, others were edifying, but not canonical. Still others were rejected as harmful. The canon was not sealed in heaven and handed down in leather binding. It developed over centuries through communal consensus. Different traditions finalized their canons at different times. The Roman Catholic canon was formalized at the Council of Trent in the 16th century. The Protestant canon followed the Hebrew Bible for the Old Testament. The Ethiopian canon remained broader. So when someone asks, who removed Enoch? The answer is more nuanced. No single council expelled it. It simply never reached universal recognition in the dominant branches of Christianity. Over time, what is not copied becomes rare. What is rare becomes unfamiliar. And what is unfamiliar feels suspicious. By the Middle Ages, most Western Christians had never encountered Enoch at all. It faded not because it was destroyed, but because it was not reproduced. Meanwhile, in Ethiopia, scribes continued copying it, which preserved it for future rediscovery. And rediscovery changes everything, because once the Dead Sea Scrolls confirmed Enoch's antiquity, modern readers began asking fresh questions. If early Jewish communities valued it, if New Testament writers knew it, if one ancient church preserved it, should we reconsider its importance? That question leads us into the next phase of this investigation, because beyond authorship and usage, there is another issue we must confront. Was the Book of Enoch excluded because it threatened theological control, or because it introduced ideas that complicated the narrative of human responsibility? In the next section, we will examine the deeper theological implications of Enoch's worldview, especially its portrayal of spiritual warfare, corruption, and divine judgment. Because perhaps the controversy surrounding Enoch isn't just historical, perhaps it's existential. And that is where this story becomes even more compelling. In the last section, we examined how the biblical canon formed, gradually, communally, and with criteria centered on apostolic authority, doctrinal consistency, and widespread use. But now we must confront a deeper question, beyond authorship and distribution. What exactly in the Book of Enoch made leaders cautious? Because when you strip away the history, the survival in Ethiopia, the manuscript discoveries, and the scholarly debates, one reality remains. Enoch presents a worldview that is bigger, darker, and more cosmic than many are comfortable with. Let's start with spiritual responsibility. In mainstream Christian theology, humanity bears responsibility for sin. Adam falls. Humanity chooses rebellion. The flood comes because every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. But Enoch introduces another layer. Corruption begins with heavenly beings. The Watchers descend. They teach forbidden knowledge. They accelerate violence. They produce hybrid giants who devastate the earth. Humanity is still guilty, but it is also influenced, manipulated. Invaded. This shifts the narrative. Instead of sin being entirely an internal human problem, Enoch portrays a spiritual ecosystem of corruption. That theology emphasizes spiritual warfare at a cosmic scale. Now think about early Christianity. The New Testament speaks of principalities and powers, of rulers in heavenly realms, of demons cast out by Christ. That framework fits comfortably with Enoch's worldview. But as Christianity matured and encountered Greco-Roman philosophy, theological emphasis often leaned toward moral responsibility and rational clarity. Too much focus on cosmic hierarchy could blur accountability. Enoch complicates blame, and complicated theology can destabilize simple preaching. Then there is angelology. Enoch doesn't just mention angels. It categorizes them, names them, describes ranks, duties, prisons, movements of stars governed by angelic beings. It reads almost like a detailed map of heaven. and while that fascinates modern readers, it can also distract. In periods when the church fought Gnosticism, a movement obsessed with secret heavenly knowledge, leaders became wary of speculative cosmology. The priority became Christ crucified, resurrection, salvation, not celestial mechanics. Enoch's elaborate descriptions risk drawing attention away from the Gospel's core, but perhaps the most unsettling element is its explanation of demons. According to Enoch, when the giants were destroyed in the flood, their spirits remained on earth as disembodied beings. These spirits afflict humanity, tempt, oppress, torment. This is one of the earliest Jewish explanations for demonic origin, and it differs from the simpler biblical statement that demons are fallen angels. Enoch suggests something more complex, that demons are the lingering spirits of corrupted hybrids. Now imagine standardizing doctrine across a growing empire. Would you want multiple competing explanations for the origin of evil spirits, or would you prefer theological simplicity? Enoch's cosmology is vivid, but vivid theology can generate questions leaders may not want every congregation debating. Then there is the issue of revelation. Enoch repeatedly emphasizes hidden knowledge, secrets of heaven revealed to a chosen figure, mysteries disclosed before the appointed time. Even though Enoch condemns the Watchers for giving forbidden knowledge, the book itself contains layers of revealed secrets. That paradox is powerful, but dangerous in the wrong hands. Movements throughout history have claimed secret revelation, special insight, hidden codes. The early church had to guard against splinter groups who weaponized mystical texts for authority. A text centered on heavenly secrets could be misused. That doesn't make it false, but it does make it sensitive. There's another factor we rarely discuss. Enoch is unapologetically apocalyptic. It speaks of final judgment in terrifying imagery. Kings cast down, rulers trembling, sinners burned, the righteous shining like lights. This language empowers oppressed communities. But once Christianity gained political legitimacy under Constantine, apocalyptic fervor became more complicated. When the church is marginalized, cosmic judgment feels hopeful. When the church is aligned with empire, judgment language can feel destabilizing. Again, this doesn't prove political motives removed Enoch, but historical context always influences discernment. And Enoch is revolutionary in tone. It confronts power directly. It warns elites explicitly. It emphasizes divine reckoning without compromise. Then we come to the identity tension we explored earlier. The Son of Man passages in Enoch resemble New Testament Christology, but without incarnation, without Bethlehem, without Calvary. For Christian orthodoxy, the incarnation is non-negotiable. God becoming flesh. Dwelling among us. Enoch single quotes as Son of Man is heavenly, enthroned, pre-existent, but not incarnate. Including such a text could risk confusion about the uniqueness of Christ's earthly mission. The church's priority was preserving the clarity of the gospel narrative. Anything that blurred that focus faced scrutiny. But here's the deeper truth. Enoch forces readers to confront a supernatural worldview that modern Christianity often minimizes. It portrays reality as layered. Spiritual beings interacting with humanity, cosmic rebellion influencing history, judgment unfolding beyond visible dimensions. For some, that worldview feels ancient and profound. For others, it feels unsettling, and institutions tend to prefer stability over mystery. Yet mystery is woven into Scripture itself. Think about Ezekiel's visions, Daniel's beasts, Revelation's dragons. Enoch fits within that apocalyptic tradition, but it expands it further. An expansion invites caution. So was Enoch excluded because it was dangerous, or because it was too expansive, too cosmic, too difficult to regulate in a rapidly institutionalizing church? Here's what we know. It was not universally condemned as heresy. It was not publicly burned en masse. It was gradually sidelined as the church clarified its theological center. And that center became the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Enoch's value became historical rather than canonical, influential, but not authoritative. Yet modern readers rediscover it and feel something stirring, because it restores a sense of spiritual depth. that feels missing. It reminds us that ancient faith was not shallow. It was cosmic. Layered. Apocalyptic. And perhaps that's why the Book of Enoch keeps resurfacing. It speaks to a hunger for mystery in an age of reduction. But we are not finished. In the next section, we will confront the modern resurgence of Enoch, why it has exploded in popularity online, how conspiracy theories distort it, and whether rediscovering it today helps or harms faith. Because the story of Enoch did not end in antiquity. It is unfolding right now. And how we handle it matters. In the last section, we examine the theology of the Book of Enoch, its cosmic worldview, its angelic hierarchies, its explanation of demons, and the apocalyptic intensity that may have made early leaders cautious. But now we step into the present, because the Book of Enoch is no longer obscure. It has become a phenomenon. Type Book of Enoch into YouTube, and you'll find millions of views. Podcasts dissect it. Influencers build entire platforms around it. Conspiracy channels treat it like suppressed revelation. It's marketed as the book they don't want you to read. But here's the irony. The Book of Enoch is not hidden. You can download it in seconds. It's printed in study editions. It's been translated into English for centuries. Nothing about it is classified. And yet, the narrative of secrecy fuels its popularity. Why? Because modern culture is drawn to forbidden knowledge. The idea that something powerful was removed creates intrigue. It implies control. Suppression. Manipulation. But when we strip away sensationalism, the historical story is more nuanced. Enoch wasn't banned in a dramatic purge. It gradually fell out of widespread use. That's very different from institutional censorship. Still, the perception of suppression resonates today. Why? Because many people feel disconnected from institutional religion. They suspect that power structures hide complexity. And Enoch feels complex, supernatural. Layered. It promises deeper insight into angels, demons, ancient giants, and cosmic rebellion, for an audience raised on sanitized Sunday school lessons. That feels electric. But here's where caution is necessary. Modern fascination with Enoch often drifts into speculation. Some claim it explains alien encounters. Others connect it to ancient astronaut theories. Some use it to justify elaborate end times timelines, detached from scripture. This is not Enoch's fault. It's interpretive excess. The Book of Enoch is ancient Jewish apocalyptic literature. It reflects Second Temple worldview. It is symbolic, poetic, theological. It is not a science manual. It is not a conspiracy blueprint. And yet, because it was excluded from most canons, it carries a mystique. But here's the question that matters. Does reading Enoch strengthen faith or destabilize it? The answer depends on posture. If someone reads Enoch looking for secret superiority, proof they possess hidden insight others lack, it can become spiritually unhealthy. But if someone reads it historically, understanding its genre and context, it becomes illuminating. It helps us understand how first century Jews thought about angels. How they understood Genesis 6. Why the language of chains, darkness, and judgment appears in Jude. And to Peter. It enriches context. It doesn't replace scripture. It informs it. And that distinction is critical. Another reason Enoch resonates today is because modern Christianity often feels disenchanted. We live in a rational age. An analytical age. Spiritual warfare is sometimes reduced to metaphor. Angels are depicted as decorative, demons as symbolic. But Enoch reminds readers that ancient faith assumed a spiritual cosmos teeming with activity. That worldview feels raw. Real. Mysterious. And for many, it restores awe. Yet there's danger in overcorrecting. Some modern readers elevate Enoch above canonical scripture. They treat it as lost truth restored. But historically, even those who respected Enoch did not universally treat it as equal to Torah or the prophetic writings. Balance matters. The Ethiopian Orthodox Ethiopian Church continues to include Enoch in its canon, not as secret knowledge, but as inherited tradition. But Western Christianity operates within a different canon tradition shaped by centuries of discernment. Neither approach is inherently sinister. They reflect different historical trajectories. The real risk today is not that Enoch exists. The risk is that it is misused, stripped from context, weaponized for sensationalism, detached from the broader biblical narrative. And when that happens, it creates confusion rather than clarity. Now consider something profound. The Book of Enoch condemns the Watchers for revealing forbidden knowledge prematurely, knowledge outside divine timing, knowledge detached from obedience. And ironically, modern obsession with Enoch sometimes mirrors that pattern, chasing revelation without grounding. But there is another side. Enoch also testifies to divine justice, to cosmic accountability. To the ultimate triumph of righteousness. It reminds us that evil, whether human or spiritual, does not go unanswered. That message resonates in every generation, especially in an age where injustice feels pervasive. So perhaps the resurgence of Enoch reveals something deeper, not a hunger for conspiracy, but a hunger for cosmic meaning. People want to know that history is not random, that spiritual forces matter, that judgment is real, that righteousness will be vindicated. And Enoch speaks to that longing, but we must handle it wisely, understanding genre, respecting canon boundaries, learning from history. Without sensationalizing it, which brings us to the final question. After everything we've explored, the Watchers. The Son of Man, Ethiopia's preservation, canon formation, theological caution, modern resurgence. What is the final verdict? Was the Book of Enoch banned, or was it simply not canonized? In the final section, we will bring all the threads together. We will confront the myth of suppression head-on, and we will answer the central question of this entire journey with clarity, nuance, and historical honesty. Because truth does not fear investigation. And the story of Enoch deserves more than hype. It deserves understanding. We've journeyed through ancient rebellion, through heavenly visions, through Ethiopian preservation. Through canon formation, through theological caution, through modern fascination. Now we return to the question that started it all. Was the Book of Enoch banned? The short answer is no, but the real answer is more layered. The Book of Enoch was never formally outlawed by a single universal decree. No dramatic council gathered to burn every copy. No empire-wide edict declared it forbidden under penalty of death. Instead, something quieter happened. It was not canonized. And over time, what is not canonized becomes uncommon. What is uncommon becomes unfamiliar, and what is unfamiliar begins to feel forbidden. That distinction matters, because banned implies suppression, but the historical record shows discernment, gradual narrowing. The early church evaluated texts based on apostolic connection, widespread usage, and doctrinal coherence. Enoch, though ancient and influential, did not meet those criteria across all Christian communities. It lacked apostolic authorship, as it was not universally read. Its theology, while powerful, was expansive and sometimes speculative, and so it was left outside the formal canon. But exclusion from canon is not the same as condemnation. Even early church fathers, who questioned its authority, still referenced it. They debated it. They wrestled with it. It was part of the theological atmosphere. And in Ethiopia, it remained scripture. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church removed it because it never viewed it as problematic, which means the narrative of secret suppression oversimplifies history. But that doesn't mean the story is boring. On the contrary, it's fascinating, because it reveals something profound about how scripture came to us. The Bible did not descend from heaven leather-bound and indexed. It emerged from communities. Communities wrestling with revelation. Communities discerning what carried divine authority. Communities guarding the heart of the gospel. And that process required boundaries. Enoch sits just outside those boundaries, close enough to influence, close enough to be quoted, close enough to illuminate context, but not included within the final list. Why? Because the center of Christian faith became crystal clear. The incarnation, the cross, the resurrection, the apostolic witness to Christ. Enoch contains no crucifixion, no empty tomb, no apostolic testimony. It is apocalyptic, prophetic, symbolic. But Christianity's foundation rests on historical events tied to eyewitnesses. That distinction shaped canon decisions. Now here's where we must be careful. The modern myth of suppression often assumes that institutional exclusion equals corruption, but sometimes exclusion simply reflects focus. The early church was fighting heresies. It was clarifying doctrine. It was expanding across cultures. A streamlined canon helped unify teaching. That doesn't mean every excluded text was dangerous. It means priorities were set. And yet, Enoch's survival tells us something beautiful. Truth, invaluable, does not vanish. When fragments of Enoch were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars realized it had shaped Second Temple Judaism deeply. It helped explain why Jude speaks of angels in chains, why Jesus uses Son of Man, why apocalyptic language saturates the New Testament. Enoch is not foreign to the Bible's world. It is part of its background. Reading it does not threaten faith when read wisely. It enriches historical understanding, but elevating it above Scripture distorts balance. So was it banned? No. Was it influential? Absolutely. Was it controversial? Without question, and perhaps that controversy reveals something about us. We are drawn to the idea of forbidden knowledge. We want to believe there are secrets hidden from us. But often, the truth is simpler. The Book of Enoch was never hidden. It was copied. Translated. Preserved in Ethiopia. Rediscovered in Q.A.N. Printed in modern editions. Available to anyone curious enough to read it. What gives it power is not suppression. It's mystery. It opens windows into a supernatural worldview that feels larger than modern realism. It reminds us that ancient faith was cosmic. Layered. Apocalyptic. But here is the final truth. The central message of Christianity does not depend on Enoch. The gospel stands without it. Christ's life, death, and resurrection do not require the watcher's narrative to hold weight. Enoch may illuminate the background, but it does not define the foundation. And perhaps that is why the early church left it where it did, close enough to inform, outside enough to protect clarity. So what should we do with it? Read it carefully, understand its genre, respect its historical influence, but do not build doctrine on what the early church did not universally affirm, because discernment matters as much as curiosity. And the story of Enoch ultimately teaches us something deeper than angelic rebellion. It teaches us that faith communities wrestle with revelation, that boundaries are drawn thoughtfully, that preservation and exclusion can coexist without conspiracy, and that truth does not fear investigation. So the next time someone says, the Book of Enoch was banned, you can respond with nuance. It wasn't banned. It was evaluated. It wasn't destroyed. It was preserved in different traditions. It wasn't erased. It was contextualized. And that distinction changes everything. If this deep dive expanded your understanding, make sure you like this video, subscribe for more historical and theological explorations, and share it with someone who's asked this question before. And I want to hear from you. After everything we've uncovered, do you think the Book of Enoch should be in the Bible? Or does its exclusion make sense? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation. The Book of Enoch is not a forgotten conspiracy. It is a window into the spiritual imagination of the ancient world that shaped the atmosphere of the Bible itself. It reveals a cosmos alive with rebellion, judgment, mystery, and hope. It challenges us to think deeper about angels, evil, justice, and the authority of Scripture. But its journey also reminds us that canon was not formed through secrecy, but through discernment. Enoch was not erased. It was positioned, influential, but not foundational, illuminating, but not central. And perhaps that is where its true power lies, not as forbidden knowledge, but as historical insight that magnifies the world Jesus stepped into. The question was never simply, why was it banned? The real question is, what does its story teach us about faith, authority, and truth? If this deep dive challenged you, like this video, subscribe for more, share it widely, and drop your thoughts in the comments below.